Welcome, friend. Tonight we drift to Athens, 370 BCE, where Plato's Academy prepares to read the tale of Atlantis, an allegory meant to warn, and someone plans to twist it into a trumpet for conquest. If the forged ending wins the dawn, calm minds may harden into war. I am Snorelock Holmes, the steady detective who walks history's sharper edges while you rest. Before sleep takes you, tell Lee in the comments which city you're listening from tonight. Close your eyes now. Your work is to breathe while I carry the weight of the mystery. Chapter 1, in which a trident bites wax. My evening began with a brush and a tray, a small storm of dust under a lamp. I was cleaning the half-moons of old bronze coins and a scatter of seashells I had gathered from a quiet shore months ago. Penelope, my old eagle, slept at my feet, a soft snore every third breath, the way a tide comes and then pauses. I hummed, an unhurried line of melody, and noted in my book, Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar, the hinge of stories. This sort of night is my normal life. A table, a lamp, objects that feel the weight of time better than I ever could. I turned a coin stamped with a horse Corinthian and then a chipped scallop with a faint pink blush. The scallop's edge caught the lamplight like a moonrise. I wrote, horses for city speed, shells for ocean patience. Both are clocks. The knock came fast and unpolished. 3 hard raps, a pause, then 2 more, lighter as if the knuckles that made them were losing courage or strength. I opened the door, and a young man nearly fell through it. He was sweat dark and reed thin, with dust laddered up his legs, and his breath came in ragged pools. Rope sandals hung by threads around his ankles. He held something against his chest with both hands, as if it were skin and would bleed if it dropped. Inside, I said, steady, and guided him to the rug before the hearth. He sagged to his knees and then onto his side, cradling the packet all the way down. Penelope lifted her head, blinked, and then set her chin back on her paws. The world did not need alarm, it needed water. I knelt, eased the leather gourd from his belt, and raised his head. Sip, I said. Slowly, he obeyed. A swallow, another. I broke a slice of honeyed bread and placed it into his palm. He nodded thanks, but spoke with the urgency of someone who knows time is not on his side. Academy, Critias, stolen dawn, he whispered. I knew the words like a lit fuse. The Academy, Plato's grove near the Cephissus River. Critias, the dialogue where Atlantis appears. Dawn, the hour when the city begins to listen. He pressed the packet into my hands. It was tied with simple twine, sealed with a clay bulla pressed into wax. The seal showed a trident, clean and sharp in design, and as it caught the lamp, I saw a fleck of bright blue grit lodged in the wax. The clay itself was cracked across a diagonal, as if someone had tried to pry it free and failed. The wax smelled faintly of olive smoke and oddly of the sea. Your name? I asked, easing his breathing with one hand on his back. Nicias, he said, eyes closed. From the Piraeus, the port of Athens. He swallowed. They were searching the copyists' stalls by the agora, wealth men's servants. One wore a purple-edged mantle. Their master carried a ring, a trident. He smiled without smiling. A trident ring, I repeated, gently. And this packet. Give it to me by a scribe from the Academy, he said. Run, she said. If it reaches you, he fails. And she can hide the lines. He attempted to sit up, and his head tipped forward like a stone on a rope. I steadied him, then helped him lean against the couch. You did well, I said. Eat a little more. Rest. Penelope rose, waddled over, and tucked herself against his side as if she had chosen a new pillow. Nicias's breath calmed. He looked down, surprised by gentleness, and a tired smile rose and fell on his face. I took the packet to the lamp. The twine was scuffed, and a thin smear of black ink marked the knot. I knew that ink squid-based, common at the academy, with a mineral tang that clings to the fingertips. The trident seal had been impressed twice, once fully and once lightly, as if someone had tested a mold. I lifted the seal. The blue grit fell onto the tray. It did not smear when pressed. It shone. This was Egyptian blue, a synthetic pigment ground to powder, rare and striking, used to signal Egyptian to Greek eyes that longed for exotic proof. Inside the packet lay a small brass scrap, nicked from a larger plate. It was thin and pliant, the color of old straw. The scrap carried tiny incisions, characters meant to mimic Egyptian script, demotic, but something about them was wrong. The lines bent where they should have hooked. Symbols sat backward, as if copied from a mirror without understanding. It was pseudo-Egyptian, not the real hand of a priest. Nicias coughed. He wants to read at dawn, he said. A reading of Plato's Critias with a new ending. Brass plate. Egyptian truth, he calls it. The scribe said no. He sent men anyway. I looked up. Did she tell you his name? No, he said, rubbing his temples. But the ring. A trident. Gold. He spoke to a gatekeeper. Bragged he pays for lectures, he pays for benches, he pays for wine. Nicias's mouth tightened. His voice was like a bronze cup. It rang, but nothing inside it. Rest, I said, and drew a blanket over his knees. I looked again at the brass scrap. In a glancing line of light, I thought I saw a faint stain, blue as the grit in the wax. Someone had rubbed pigment on this metal to perfume it with Egypt. The clock on my mantel ticked with the patient pulse of a swimmer. I had work to do. Before it struck again, Chapter 2. Bread, water, and Atlantis. Nicias dozed by the hearth, the blanket drawn up to his ribs, Penelope a small hill against his side. I set a cup of water near him and carried the tray of clues to my desk. The cracked clay bulla, the fleck of Egyptian blue pigment, the brass scrap incised with clumsy demotic, and the knot of twine blackened by squid ink from the academy. I took out a linen cloth and a lens. The clay bulla bore a slightly oval impression. A stylized trident, the central tine cut deeper than the two outer, the sort of distinctive flourish a goldsmith makes when he wants his client to own a symbol, not just a stamp. There was grit lodged in the left outer tine, a tiny pinch of blue. I teased it free and set it beside the other fleck. Same color, same sparkle on the edges. The wax around the clay had fingerprints pressed into it, ridgelines small, probably the scribe's, overlapping with broader prints, likely a larger man who tried to pry the seal but stopped when it threatened to crack. That diagonal fracture wasn't an accident. It was the record of a moment of caution. He feared breaking what he had not read. I lifted the brass scrap to the light. It was not orichalcum, despite what the forgery would claim. Plato wrote of orichalcum as a precious metal gleaming like fire, an alloy the Atlanteans prized. True orichalcum, in classical writing, is a copper-zinc or copper-gold alloy, rare, with a red-gold glow. This scrap wore the dull yellow of common brass. I scratched its edge with a pin. It shaved easily. Common, gore-dog. Exactly what a man with more coin than scruple would hold up in front of a crowd. The pseudo-Egyptian characters were odd. Some shapes resembled demotic, the cursive used in later periods in Egypt to write administrative texts, but whoever cut these marks had not lived with them. They confused the loop of N with the hook of R, and they copied a sign like a bird's head, but reversed its beak. They had not drawn Neith's emblem properly, a shield and crossed arrows, and instead cut two lines that might fool an amateur at a distance. This was a forgery fashioned by someone who read about Egypt in Greek, not someone who read Egypt in Egypt. I touched the smear on the twine. It stained my fingertip a faint grey-black squid ink. The Academy scribes are known for a particular recipe. Sepia cut with soot, sticky in the hand, slow to dry in winter. I thought of the scribe who sent this packet. The one Nicias could got name. Ink-stained fingers. A reed stylus behind the ear. Courage enough to send a runner into the night. The fire settled into a low cradle of coals. I leaned back in my chair and spoke softly, for both Nicias and for you listening now. Atlantis, I murmured. It appears exactly where our courier said, in Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias, around 360 BC. No earlier, no other ancient source. Plato frames it as a story heard by Solon in Egypt, passed down to Critias, and told at the Academy as a moral mirror. An island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we call the Strait of Gibraltar, rich in orichalcum, built in rings of land and water, ruled by 10 kings under the eldest, Atlas. A proud empire that grew lazy and greedy, and a virtuous prehistoric Athens that defeats it. Then the gods send earthquakes and floods, and Atlantis sinks in a day and a night. I poured a drop of oil onto the brass. It beaded in small circles, then found a seam and ran. Plato wrote this not as a map, but as a lesson. It is a thought experiment about hubris. Aristotle is said to have dismissed it outright. He who invented it also destroyed it. The dialogue Critias breaks off mid-sentence in our manuscripts. It is a fragment. Perhaps Plato meant to continue and did it. Perhaps he chose to leave it as a shard, so its edges would cut a little and make us careful. I set the brass scrap beside the clay bulla, but stories this vivid grow legs. In our later ages, people tried to make Atlantis a place. Ignatius Donnelly, in the 19th century, wrote a thick volume claiming Atlantis seeded all civilizations. He wanted a lost continent that explained pyramids and myths with a single answer. Helena Blavatsky folded Atlantis into a mystical system of root races, making it ancient beyond ages. Others have tried to place it in the Azores, in the Sahara's richer structure, under the Black Sea, on Cyprus, in the Canaries. Each attempt rearranges evidence like furniture made to fit a stubborn room. I glanced at Nicias, who slept on, the bread beside him. Yet the earth gives us its own truths. Real places have sunk. Akrotiri on the island of Thera, modern Santorini, was a bright Bronze Age city of frescoes and stairways and quiet courtyards, buried in ash by a great eruption around 1500 BC. It is beautiful and tragic, and some see in its caldera the echo of concentric rings. But the date, the location, the details do not match Plato. Thonis-Heracleion, a port in Egypt's Nile delta, slid under the water after earthquakes and liquefaction. Divers have found its harbors, statues, and ship remains. Doggerland, the drowned land between Britain and the continent, faded under rising seas thousands of years ago. The sea takes. But none of these make Atlantis more than what it is in Plato's hand, an allegory about moral strength and the dangers of empire. The coals sighed. A log settled. Penelope's ear twitched. I folded my hands and let silence sit with us for a few breaths. The stakes tonight are clean, I continued, still softly. A man in Athens, wealth, practiced in patronage, Mnesarchus of Colonus, seeks to change what the city hears at dawn. He has a trident ring and hired guards. He carries a brass plate, dressed as orichalcum and dusted with Egyptian blue. He wants to literalize a cautionary myth into a marching song. If the forged ending is recited in the academy, people will nod and say the gods bless conquest, and the war fever that always sleeps under civic pride will stir. I took up the buller again, feeling its cool grit and the small crack that ran like a lightning scar. We have hours. The moon is high now. Dawn waits like a held breath. Plato's circle will gather under the plane trees. Torches will be lit, then lifted away as the sky finds its own light. Timaeus of Leucri may be there to speak. Students, patrons, and idlers too. Among them, men with short cloaks and quiet sandals watching for a moment to display a plate and a packet, to make a crowd lean forward. Nicias stirred. His eyes fluttered, then opened. "Did I reach you in time?" he asked. "In time," I said. "You did well." He nodded once, relief in a line across his forehead. "The scribe said you would know how to keep a story honest." I rose and cut another slice of bread. "A story is a skittish animal," I said. "It runs when cornered. But if you hold out your hand and stand very still, it will come back and nose your fingers. Then stay. We will make the morning stand very still." He smiled at that, then closed his eyes again, sinking back into sleep with a soft exhale. Penelope sighed as if she too approved of metaphors. I arranged the clues in a small square of velvet. From left to right, clay buller with trident, blue grit, brass scrap, stained twine, a note card with my neat hand, Mnesarchus of Colonus, Poetrin and a purple-edged mantle, trident ring, another card, Academy, Plato, Critias, Atlantis as moral allegory, no corroborating Egyptian record, Aristotle's skepticism, and finally, deadline, dawn. I tapped the brass with my nail. It answered with a thin sound, like a coin that fails a test. Good. Pretenders always sing a little wrong. Chapter 3. Smoke becomes sea. It was time to go, and that meant my oldest ritual. I have learned over years how to walk the distance between a quiet room and an urgent past. I do not force it. I let it happen like sleep, and I give it the small helps it asks for. I cleared the desk, except for the velvet square with the clues. I drew the curtains nearly shut, so the night could be a soft, dark bowl. I set my chair at an easy angle to the hearth, where the last coals held a crimson thread. I took down the pipe I use only for travel, not tobacco, not anything that would bite the lungs, just a curl of herbs that smell faintly of nutmeg and rain on rock. I do not even light it. I hold it like a metronome for the breath. I rested my fingertips on the clay bulla and felt the cool curve of its edge. My other hand lay on the brass, flat, as if I were quieting a bird. Then I closed my eyes and counted backward, not as a test, but as a lullaby for the mind that stands guard. 10, 9, 8, slow breaths. 7, 6. The room settled. 5, 4. The lamp's glow lowered behind my lids, and the orange in the hearth turned more toward red. 3. A small warmth beneath my hand, as if the brass remembered sun. 2. The faintest tang of salt in the air. 1. Smoke turned to mist. The arm of my chair became a wooden saddle. The floor pulled forward under me, and the cushion shaped itself to a patient animal's back. Somewhere a bell thudded twice, then the second sound swelled and softened into a cicada's rhythm. My house's clock let go of its tick. In its place came the tiny fidgets of nighttime leaves. I opened my eyes to olive shadows. The night air was warm and dry on my cheeks, a kindness after the indoor heat. I felt simple linen against my skin and a belt knot at my waist. My feet were in leather sandals, their straps crossing my insteps. The terrain underfoot was polished pebbles pressed into earth. A colonnade stood ahead, stone columns pale as milk in starlight, with oil lamps guttering every few spans, their bowls darkening at the lips. The Academy, Plato's grove. Plane trees curved their broad leaves toward one another like 100 green hands cupping a flame. The Cephasus breathed nearby, not a river's roar, but a whisper against reeds. The air carried crushed olive and a trace of smoke from braziers left to fade. A night bird made 3 notes from a fig tree and then fell still. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. They wore no modern ring, no watch. In my palm lay a small lump of something. I opened my fingers. A fleck of blue grit winked, then lay still. The world accepts you when it returns your props. I took a step, and the pebbles underfoot answered with a sound I already loved, a quiet crunch like bread crust breaking. On the far side of the colonnade, voices moved low murmur, the hum of philosophy not quite ready to sleep. Now and then a laugh, quickly hushed, as if even humour felt the hour and its thin veil. The sky to the east was still indigo, but its edge imagined pink. Dawn was not here, but it had written a letter ahead to say it was on its way. I had work to begin before Mnesarchus's men finished their sweep of the scriptorium. If the trident ring gleamed anywhere, it would gleam in antechambers and on porches where patrons wait before making their gestures. I stood at the threshold and let the grove breathe around me. No panic. Panic is a poor tool for a detective. Calm is much sharper. The mystery was simple in its bones and dangerous in its clothing. A forged ending to Plato's Critias would be read at dawn, turning a warning into a banner. My task was to disrobe the forged of its costume and to put the true lines, whatever they were, finished or fragmentary, into the right hands. A cramp of sandals on gravel made me lift my head. Lanterns moved along a walk, bobbing low. I could see only hands and the brief triangle of a chin beyond a cloak's edge. Hired men sometimes move that way, trying to pass as students by bowing their heads, but the weight in their shoulders gives them away. I turned down another path where the air was cooler and the lights did not reach. Plain leaves brushed my hair like a blessing. As I moved deeper into the grove, I touched the brass scrap in my belt pouch, felt its faint scratch, my scratch, on the edge. The trident seal in clay rode beside it, heavier than its size allowed. They were small anchors to a world you and I both know. They tethered the dream to the desk, and the desk to the dawn. I smiled, a quiet baring of teeth in the dark, and breathed very well. Beyond the next colonnade stood a row of tables for scribes, each with a shallow lamp and a sand bowl to dry ink. A reed stylus lay across one like a sleeping animal's foreleg. The soot at the lip made a familiar crescent. A good sign. The Academy's hands had been here not an hour ago. The smell of squid ink still held. Somewhere among these shadows would be the courage that sent Nicias to my door. Somewhere, too, the ring that would try to make a myth walk on real legs. The night gave me a little more darkness to work with before the pink at the horizon began to herald an audience. I stepped into the shelter of the columns and listened. Then I let the grove take me in. Chapter 4. In which the grove breathes, and a trident gleams, Athens, 360 BCE. Plato's Academy lay like a low, thoughtful song under the night. The plane trees whispered. Oil lamps along the colonnade trembled with little blue halos. The earth held the cool of the Cepaisus, and the gravel under my sandals remembered 100 careful steps from earlier nights, and 100 more yet to come. I kept my hands calm and open. In this world, my tweed had become a plain tunic, belted with soft leather. My eyes needed no time to adjust. I knew the shape of danger in lamplight. It looks a lot like impatience. We were at Plato's Academy. We were standing on the edge of a story that had taught virtue for a generation and might, by dawn, be turned to trumpet war. The tale of Atlantis was not a city, not a continent, but a mirror. Nedsacus of Colonus wanted to stamp that mirror with his seal and sell it as a map. I moved along the colonnade, slow as a tide, and looked through the open door of a side scriptorium. 2 men stood inside, their backs to me, shaped like problems pretending to be solutions. Leather vests, short cloaks. The rough confidence of hired hands who believe they work for a good man because gold has a way of telling a better story than truth. One of them held a bronze plate wrapped in cloth. I could smell the metal from where I stood, a warm, chalky note, too bright, too eager. Brass likes to pretend it is something older and rarer. The real metal Mensacus, named orichalcum, was a word Plato used to make a myth gleam. In real life, orichalcum was whatever men needed it to be to sell a lie. The taller guard muttered. He said, check every niche. He lifted the cloth. The corner of the plate caught the lamplight and winked. My breath stayed steady, and I stepped back into shadow. A cicada paused. The world held its tiny note of suspense. Then I noticed something at the base of the doorway. In the gravel, half pressed, was a broken wax seal. It had been crushed by a heel. The impression still showed a trident within a circle, the same emblem as the broken bulla on my waking desk. The same arrogant flourish Amnesacus wore on his finger. I crouched, lifted it. The wax was tacker with heat from the day, and tried to cling to my skin. Inside the impression, in the inner tine of the trident, a few grains of blue grit had lodged themselves. I rolled one between thumb and forefinger. It was not lapis, it was pigment, Egyptian blue synthetic, ground from silica, copper, and calcium. The hue that liked to live in temple murals and grave goods, not in the wax of Athenian seals. Someone had dusted the seal to make it look piously foreign. Someone wanted this to feel like a message delivered by the Nile. The night moved around me. In the courtyard, a low murmur suggested a small gathering, not yet a crowd. On another night, that sound would be philosophers trading lines as easily as bread. Tonight, it was a tremor in a quiet earth. The guard with the plate glanced toward the door. I slipped from the lintel like a leaf yields to a breeze and walked deeper into the grove, tracing a circle that brought me closer to the rear of the scriptorium. The academy's garden extended in neat beds and potted olives, the jars like patient sentries. A moth hammered itself gently against an oil lamp, thudding like a tiny heartbeat against glass. I paused. There was a smear on the stone lip of a water basin, faint, black, with a sheen in the lamplight. I touched it to my tongue. Iron tange. Squid ink. The Academy's scribes used it for its rich blacks and clean lines. I imagined a hand, inked and steady, moving fast in fear. A footstep, not mine. I angled my body behind an open-work screen of lattice and vine. The tall guard came out, the bronze plate now set aside on a table just inside, his hands empty and curious. He scanned potted plants as if a sentence might lurk under their leaves. Men like him always look for the thing, not the meaning. It makes them miss the small truths that trouble big lies. He moved on. I counted silently, one grain of sand at a time. Then I returned to the spot by the scriptorium door. I leaned in and watched the second guard lift a papyrus roll, sniff it, unroll 2 spans, then grunt and roll it back. He put it aside with the care of someone who is careful only when people are watching. There was, on the table next to the plate, a scrap of parchment with a smear of blue. That same pigment again. He had dusted something, perhaps the wax, then wiped his finger here without thought. The blue had fallen into the trident seal's crevice, like a breadcrumb trail for anyone who cared to think. I did care. I pocketed the broken seal half, and the blue grit with it. I looked up. On the far side of the courtyard, in the long shadow of a portico, a figure stood very still, as if an idea had grown legs and decided to wait. She shifted a weight, a tiny roll from heel to ball, and I saw the reed stylus tucked behind her ear. Ink had the same stubborn way of living under her fingernails that it had shown on the basin's lip. She was watching me with the cautious hope of someone who had decided, very recently, to trust her courage. I went to her. "Good evening," I said softly. "The lamps are acting like frightened birds. Perhaps they know a storm has come, but a quiet one." She tilted her head, as if weighing my voice. "You are not one of his men." "No," I said, "nor one of his dreams. My name is Snorelock Holmes." At that, her shoulders lowered a fraction. "The Academy has its own watchers," she murmured, "but none of them stand that still near danger." "You have something that doesn't want to be found," I said, and he, I glanced toward the scriptorium, has something that desperately wants to be believed. In the courtyard's center, a crow called once and then forgot its purpose. the night settled again. "Come," she said, and beckoned into the dark between two stacked amphorae. "I am Nausithea of Sais. Names matter." Sais mattered. It was in Sais, by Plato's telling, that Solon heard of Atlantis from a priest. Nausithea wore that origin plainly, and she wore fear like a cloak that did not quite fit. I recognized restraint in her face and the alertness in her gaze. "They pressed me," she said in a low voice. "Coins. Flattery." One of them joked the academy should thank them for finishing an old man's half-told tale. When I did it laugh with him, he laughed harder. I knew their plan. "Tell me," I said, "they ye to read a forged closing to the Critias at dawn. They will set out their plate and call it proof. Inscriptions from Egypt, they'll say. They will praise conquest and call it divine favor. They will point at the academy and claim it agrees." She looked at her hands. I could not let that happen. "Of course," I said simply. "Where are the real lines?" Her eyes flashed to the garden. "Hidden." But listen, the genuine closing I saw was lots long. It warned against literal belief. It used Plato's own tone, sober, almost tender. If they read their version first, if they seized the voice, even truth to be twisted to follow it. A door opened in the scriptorium, and the tall guard stepped out, shrugging, his companion behind him. The one inside lifted the plate again. The cloth whispered across its surface like a snake along dry grass. "We will have to be precise," I said. "But panic is a poor tool for a detective. We will think. We will move. We will keep breathing." Menasithea's mouth made the shape of a quick smile. "Breathing I can do. Show me the hiding place," I said. "Not yet," she said, voice barely above a breath. "He has watchers. I can fetch it when they circle the courtyard. Give me a moment." She stepped back deeper into shadow and watched the guards. I stood still, counting again, feeling the weight of the broken seal half in my palm. Under my thumb, the blue grit felt like cool sand. Out beyond the grove, the low sound of Athens at night kept its measured time-cart wheels far off, a dog complaining, the city's breathing. Dawn was a few hours away and walking toward us. Nesicus would want to meet it, like a host greeting a guest before the old man of the house could get out of bed. I looked again at the scriptorium door. The inside guard set down the plate and twisted his shoulders like a man annoyed by long work. He wiped his brow with the back of his wrist and left a short black streak of squid ink. The image fixed itself in my mind. Ink on the wrong man's skin, blue grit on a boastful seal, trident ring that had visited too many wax bulli. I felt the pattern settling, the way a net falls true when thrown with the right motion. The first clue was here, the half seal with its telltale pigment, meaning the forgery wanted to be believed as Egyptian, meaning Mnesarchus's story leaned on a foreign authority because his own had no ground. Menasithea's voice brushed my ear. "They go." I saw the tall guard wave, saw his partner take the plate again and follow him out, both moving toward the larger courtyard, where a low, public voice had begun to gather listeners. A man was speaking about truth. I knew his tone before I heard the words. It had silk in it. "Now," she said, "walk with me, not fast." We moved along the potted olives. The leaves held the oil of the day's sun and gave it back as a faint scent. Every pot had a small bowl set beneath to catch water. At the fourth pot, Mnasythea crouched. She lifted the shallow bowl. Under it, on the packed earth, rested a beeswax writing tablet no larger than an outstretched hand. Her fingers hesitated over it like a blessing withheld. "Here," she whispered, "but careful. The wax takes impressions too easily." I nodded. I had made things appear and vanish in wax since I was a boy who liked to read more than he liked to sleep. I slid a finger under the tablet and raised it. It was warm to my skin, even in the night air. It had held the day. There were faint letters in the surface, shallow as thought. The Greek marched in a line that did not need to be long to be clear. She did not let me read it yet. Not here. A lantern's sweep came close, and we lowered the bowl back into place and moved away, empty-handed to any watching eye. From the courtyard, I heard Mensarkos' voice at last. Polished, trained, too smooth. Friends. The gods send signs at the right hour. In my hands I bring an afterword from the Nile's priests. You will see it at dawn. He wanted applause. He got murmurs. He would try again, louder when the sky began to pale. We must prove his plate false before he can chain the crowd to it, I said to Mnasythea. I have a sliver, she said, voice steadying. Cut from its edge when he let me copy a bit. He was proud. He wanted me to admire it. She reached into her belt pouch and fished out a tiny shard of yellow metal. He calls it orichalcum. I have seen temple bronze. This is brass. I pinched it between forefinger and thumb. It was light and eager to bend. The characters on it were a confused sketch of Egypt. Demotic, I said. From a later age than this. I traced a line, and here the shield of Neith is drawn wrong. She nodded. He learned shapes by rote. He does not know what they hit. That is often the way with men who love the sound of authority more than its work, I said. I gave her back the sliver. She closed it in her fist and looked toward the courtyard, where Mnesarkos continued to purr at men who preferred not to be told what to think. The Academy's labels were everywhere if you knew how to read them. The peristyle's pillar had a notch worn by idle thumbs. A fig tree near the path leaned as though bending to overhear arguments that had lasted all night. The stones near the lecture space were polished by sandals and questions. It was a place built to hold minds, not metal plates. That was a problem for Mensarkos, and that meant it would be a solution for us. Come, I said softly. We will put the pieces where they can do their best work. We will keep the dawn honest. Above us, the constellations watched with their old, indifferent patience. The world can be saved by quiet hands when loud ones grow too sure of themselves. Chapter 5, in which a scribe speaks and a bowl keeps a secret. Mnasythea led me along the portico to a corner of the garden where the shadows from the plane trees quilted the ground in soft squares. She walked like someone who had learned early to make her steps say nothing about her thoughts. The reed stylus behind her ear glinted, a small sliver of brightness in a night meant for listening rather than seeing. We paused between two amphorae, stacked almost to my shoulder. The painted figures on them looked down with mild curiosity. Men with oars. Women with baskets. The old scenes people put on jars to keep company with their grain. The amphorae smelled faintly of olives and clay. "You said the genuine lines are short," I murmured. She nodded. "Plato leaves space like a teacher who knows when to set down the chalk and let a student think. The words I saw were like that. He calls Atlantis a tale told for moral reflection. He says to treat it as mythos, not history. He says what matters is the image of hubris and virtue, not the marsh details of rings and canals. In our waking time," I told her gently, "that image was often forgotten. Men with books and men with shovels and men with dreams all chased a city that was never there. They found other wonders, the Reza's buried houses, Thonis-Heracleion, a city sunk at the Nile's mouth, and called them proofs for a story that had asked for humility. That is what stories do, when we demand they be maps." She listened with that faraway focus I would later see in Plato's eyes. Perhaps this is what his students learn first, to let a fact rive and make space around it. "You speak with 2 ages in your mouth," she said. "That is my work," I said, "to keep the bridge from collapsing just because some of us insist water is stone." She exhaled softly, and her shoulders loosened another notch. "You understand. Good. Then we need speed and care." She glanced toward the center of the academy. "He will try to gather more ears." I nodded. "Tell me about the plate." She opened her fist and showed me the sliver again in the pool of lamplight between our palms. The metal caught the light and returned it hungrily. It was eager to be admired and less eager to be true. "He came some days ago," she said. "He wore that ring with the trident." He showed us the plate, wrapped in linen, and said the priests at Sides had recovered it from a chest. He claimed it was old and holy. He wanted one of us to copy the characters to Greek, so that the Egyptian authority could speak to Athens. She swallowed. He had the tone of a man who thinks he is conferring honor where he is only carrying contagion. "Men who commission forgeries often believe they are midwives to truth," I said. "They think if the story is powerful, the facts will forgive them." "I tested the surface with a reed," she went on. "The shaving came off too easily. I saw the color. Brass is a greedy yellow. The true bronzes of the sanctuaries carry a different age in their skin, even when they are polished. And these characters," she pointed with her ink-stained thumbnail, "some are demotic signs, but they are of a later style. A few are invented. And the emblem of Neith. He gives her 2 crossed arrows but forgets the circle and the standard. He remembers weapons and forgets the thing that holds them." I smiled without mirth. He drew war and forgot discipline. "It fits tonight." She took a breath that sounded like someone choosing to live past fear. I hid the real lines because I feared he would steal them the moment they were set aside. Plato writes on wax tablets when he thinks privately before ordering a scroll. I have seen his notes. I know his hand. I saw this tablet. I was supposed to transfer those words later today. I took it sooner. I put it under the bowl. Her face checked mine for judgment. I could not let him have them. "Good," I said. "You saved the meaning from being used as bait." From the courtyard came a ripple of claps at something Nausicaa had said. His voice threaded through the trees. "Atlantis, my friends. Why should their courage sleep under ashes when we can wake it?" This talk of courage, makes cowards of careful men. And the Scythea whispered, they will feel brave until the ships leave harbor. Then they will feel hungry. Stories are lighter to carry than grain, I said, and so they travel faster. But we can change their direction. We slid back toward the garden. She led me to the potted olive. The bowl sat there like a deliberate silence. She lifted it again in one motion, no scrape, no wobble. I admired her wrist. Under it, the beeswax tablet lay obedient and unremarkable. It wore obscurity very well. That is the disguise truth prefers most days. She set it in my hands. The wax shone in the lamplight with the faint bloom of oil that all old wax knows. The Greek letters sat in the soft surface as if they had just arrived and were still cooling. I read, not aloud. The lines were short enough for memory, long enough to anchor the morning. Speak as mythos, to shape virtue, not as logos, to license conquest. Let the tale rest as warning. If you hunger to know the city's stones, you have missed the lesson of its fall. I exhaled. The words fit the voice. They were like Plato's other cautions plain, almost stern, but with the compassion of a teacher who refuses to flatter a student into error. No orchestras, no trumpets. A bell rung once, clear. Nesithea watched my face. I nodded. Genuine and dangerous to a man like Mnesarchus, because the fewer words truth uses, the harder it is to twist them without breaking them. She let out a small sound that was almost a laugh. I like that. I slid the tablet into the inner fold of my tunic for a moment. Its warmth against my chest felt like a promise. Then I gave it back to her. You will keep it under your control until we have made the other arrangements. She blinked, surprised. You do not want it? I want you to be seen holding nothing if they search me, I said, and I want you to know I meant what I said before. We will keep breathing. Panic hands things to the wrong people. Her eyes softened. Snorelock, you are a very strange kind of man. One of a kind is a comfortable number, I said. Tell me, who else here can speak with weight at dawn? Timaeus of Locri is here, she said at once. He is visiting. He will defer to Plato, but when he speaks, people lean toward him. Good, I said. We will need him to shape the edges around Mnesarchus's attempt. The shout of a guard snapped our heads toward the colonnade. Footprints, the man called, pointing with his chin. His hand hovered above his sword, not to draw it, but to let everyone see he could. He crouched by the pot we had used earlier. I smiled inwardly. The bowl had been put down as it had been lifted, true as a plumb line. Whatever he saw, it was not enough to make a path. It was only the sign of a body passing through space. Men like him wanted straight lines. We had given him curves. The other guard laughed. Cats. Always cats in these gardens. Cats that read, the first said, trying for wit and failing. He stood up and wiped his hands together. His palm showed a black smear. He licked his thumb, rubbed it away, and left a grey half-moon. Squid ink again. The proof of work lingered even on the men who did not understand the work. Nesithea nudged me with her elbow. I also have something else, she whispered, and slipped a little leather pouch from her belt. She opened it to show a small pumice stone, a reed scraper, and a vial of something with a sour smell. Vinegar steeped with salt, she said, for cleaning bronze. It will not burn the brass, but it will pull a false glaze away. A useful voice for the crowd, I murmured. Let them see the yellow. I took the pumice and brushed its gritty surface with my thumb, and let them hear the scrape. She closed the pouch and tied it with efficient fingers. I want it done without shouting, she said. He makes shouting look like wisdom. I want quiet to win. That is our style, I said. We will make silence louder than his plate. We moved along with the shadow toward the lecture space. A small stage of stone, nothing grand, but how many minds had stepped up upon it and changed the course of thought with a handful of sentences. A low table sat near the speaker's place. I touched it and felt the familiar polish of debate smooth under my fingers. You know him? Nausithea asked softly. I have known many men like him, I said, and I have known men like Plato. The former love mirrors they can pose in front of. The latter love windows. She tilted her head. You speak in pictures. I speak to keep you awake just enough to be safe and sleepy enough that to drown in anger, I said. It is late. Let anger go to bed before you do. She breathed out again. Snorelock, she said, almost a whisper. If he reads that plate, if he reads even a line, it will feel like he has the gods at his shoulder. He has a ring at his finger, I said. The gods sit where they always sit, somewhere old and quiet, listening for truth. We stood together and listened to the Academy's night breaths. In the courtyard, Menesarchus was finishing his first act, promising a dawn revelation. The guards were fanning out to patrol the paths. The lamps were trimmed. The stars looked down. The little bowl under the olive tree hid a tablet that might save the meaning of a myth from men in love with their own reflections. Come, I said. It's time to ask Timaeus for a favor. Chapter 6, in which we move like water and the midpoint speaks. We followed the edge of the peristyle, our steps falling into the rhythm of barefoot hush against smooth stone. The lamps hummed their thin insect hymns. Our shadows walked with us, long, then shorter as we crossed from one pool of light to another. A knot of men stood in the courtyard proper. At their center was Menesarchus. Even in dim light, wealth has a way of suggesting itself without permission. The purple stripe at his cloak's edge caught the lamps like wine. His chin tilted. The gold trident ring pressed against his folded fingers just enough to leave 3 little crescents in his own skin. Self-branded. It suited him. He was speaking at the level that makes men lean closer without admitting they are leaning. The priests of Sais do not speak idly, he said. They record. They preserve. And now, their wisdom will complete our friend's beautiful tale. What was only an image becomes a record. He said our friend, and meant my leverage. He said record, and meant weapon. A few students nodded as if trying on belief like a new cloak. Others frowned the way careful minds do when a sentence goes too fast. I kept walking, not toward him but toward the rear of the crowd where a man stood with a polished walking staff and a sea-green pin fastening his cloak. Timaeus of Locri carried the sea in his face the way fishermen carry the day's wind in their hair. He looked at people with patience. That was useful. I touched his elbow lightly. He turned and saw me. In that second of recognition that stands between strangers and allies, a lot can be decided. I gave him the smallest nod and said, "Friend, you do not know me. I know you. I ask a favor for the sake of the Academy's morning." He studied my eyes. "You speak like a man who has walked farther than these trees," he said. "I have," I said simply, "and we have little time." "Then we will be brief," he said, mouth tilting into a reflective half smile. "What do you need?" "Begin at dawn, without waiting for anyone else's drama," I said. "Speak of cycles and floods. Speak of Thera's fire and Helike's drowning. Put the minds here in a place where nature is teacher and myth is mirror. Make their thoughts sit down before his plate stands up." Timaeus' eyes crinkled kindly. "You ask me to start a lecture before the theatre opens?" "Yes," I said. "The theatre relies on darkness. You rely on light." He nodded gravely. "And you?" "I will unmask a forgery without calling anyone a liar," I said. "And I will put a true sentence in Plato's hand." He took a slow, deliberate breath. "I can do my part." "Good," I said. "Your staff makes a comforting sound when it taps stone. Let it anchor the morning." Timaeus' hand rested on the staff's smooth top. "The sound is honest because the wood is old," he said. "Honest side has that quality. Who brings the true sentence?" "Nausithea," I said, inviting her closer with a small wave. She stepped forward. The light threw a small aureole on the ink at her fingertips. Timaeus bowed his head to her. "Scribe," he said, with respect. Her eyes flicked to his pin and softened. "Lockree," she said. "You speak of circles as if you were born in one." He chuckled. "If the gods made me round, the sea filed me smooth." Nisarchus's voice rose a notch. "At dawn," he announced, "the city will hear an older city name its heir." He smiled, and let the smile sit for applause that did not bloom as richly as he liked. A guard began to patrol the path we needed to cross. He was the tall one again, the glint of brass from the plate's edge still in my mind. He looked at the ground more than at faces, as if truth wanted to stay underfoot. "Walk," I said to Nausithea, very small under my breath. "Like you are thinking of bread. Men rarely stop women who are thinking of bread." We moved along the line of potted olives again, this time keeping a steady, unhurried pace. The guard's lamplight swept over the flat of my tunic and slid away. Nausithea's face was calm and empty as a slate ready for the day's first line. When we reached the place with the bowl and the tablet, she made a turn that was at once too slow to be urgent and too determined to be aimless. She knelt. The guard's light angled back. I put myself between it and the small act of lifting a bowl. The light painted my shoulders and decided I was a wall. That is the best a man can be, some nights, a wall between a thing and eyes that should not see it. She raised the bowl. I set my body at ease. A gentle clink of ceramic against ceramic. The tablet came up into her lap and into the fold of her dress with the delicacy of a secret that wanted to live. We stood. We walked away. The guard's light dipped and moved on. He was muttering about cats again. At the corner of the portico, we stopped. A soft breath escaped her like the inside of a flute. That was the moment, she whispered. I thought of losing it. You did knit, I said. You are steady. We slid into a shrine alcove, a small recess in the wall with a humble goddess looking out with level eyes. The candle there burned with the forgiving steadiness of tallow. Now, she said, and held up the tablet as if to the goddess first, then to E. Read it again so it lives in both of us. I read. The sentence fit like a well-cut stone in a wall. There is a pleasure in work that fits, that does not require force. She looked at me, and something in her face shifted perceptibly, as if fear had stepped aside to let purpose walk through. Snorelock, she said, and there was a tremor under the quiet. I took it for the academy. But she closed her eyes, opened them. I am afraid even the true words can become a banner. If he snatches them from us and reads them first, he could force them into the shape of his argument. He would see. See, even Plato concludes in favor of our enterprise, and twist mythos to mean myth we can enact. I nodded. The midpoint of a case is the place where the simple theft becomes a rescue, or the straightforward rescue becomes a deeper theft. This was that pivot. You did not steal for yourself, I said. You stole to keep them from using truth as ballast. Her breath trembled, then steadied. Yes. Good, I said, and I let that word sit. Here is what we will do. Before you tell me, she said, know this. They plan to do more than read. They plan a little pageant, a lamp held above the plate, a scribe poised to translate, a guard to hold the crowd back so they must look from a distance and at an angle that flatters the metal. He is staging a threshold no one can cross. In that gap, he will do his trick. That helps, I said. I have a trick of my own, but I must set it softly. We stood in the shrine's hush and heard the larger hush of the grove beyond. Mnesarchus's pitch was still rising in the courtyard, like a man tuning a lyre to a higher note than it was meant to carry. I looked at the candle and let my thoughts array themselves in a row. Then I began to speak in that slow cadence that turns fear into tasks. First, we will see Plato receives the real tablet in time and privately, I said. Second, we will give Mnesarchus a wax tablet that will embarrass itself when he tries to show off. Third, we will ask Timaeus to begin early, to surround the attempt with facts about floods and fires that teach caution. Fourth, we will show the plate is brass. Fifth, you will read the demotic errors, calmly as a scribe. These together will take the theatre out from under him. Mnasathea's mouth made a serious line that wanted to be a smile. That is many steps, she said. But they are small. I can walk them. And we will not cross at a run, I said. We will walk. She looked to the side and her face changed. Mnesarchus had moved toward us, not near, but nearer than we liked. His guard, the tall one, had stopped and was looking back down the path we had taken. He crouched and lifted his lamp to the ground again. I tilted my head. The lamp's light highlighted a faint smear on the stone. Oil from a bowl? No, the crescent shape where the bowl's lip had once rested and now did again. Not a path, but a sign a mind could choose to read in the morning if it wanted to be convinced retroactively. We should move, I said. We have our plan. It is time to treat the wax. What wax? Mnasathea asked. The decoy, I said. We will oil the letters so they vanish under heat. Her eyes lit with professional pleasure. Ah. The old trick, she said. I have seen children cry when their names disappear. But men of a certain kind grow careful instead, I finished. Or, in his case, careless in a new way. We left the shrine and moved back toward the quieter side of the grove, where a work table held writing things and the night's drafts. The ink block sat where someone had set it down absent-mindedly and never quite remembered to stack it. A bundle of fresh wax tablets lay stacked like sliced loaves. I took one. Its surface was blank and smooth, waiting for its first mark. From Imnacithea's pouch came a tiny pot of olive oil. She dipped a finger and, with the softness only a scribe's hand can manage, wrote a few test letters on a spare chip of wax. Then she held it above a lamp. We watched. Slowly, the sheen of oil drank the heat, and the faint letters dissolved back into smoothness. Good, she said. We will inscribe something that looks like the lines he wants. When he holds it to a lamp to show off, he will make his words go away by his own pride. And we will lay the oil thin, I said. Thin enough to hold for a moment so he can boast first. Let the boasting carry him. We chose phrasing that would be plausible in his mouth, grandiloquent and not Plato's voice. Mnasithea wrote in a hand slightly unlike her own, an imitation of a less careful scribe. The letters looked enough like truth to seduce a man looking for flattery, and enough like a trap to spring the moment a lamp warmed them. Footsteps scuffed near the peristyle. The tall guard, he paused, sniffed, as if people had smells of guilt as distinct as olive and wine. His lamp moved on. I drew a small breath and felt the timing of the night settle into a pattern I recognized. Dawn was nearer. The lamps were trimmed closer to the wicks. The stars' edges softened. The cicadas' song thinned and made room for birds. Snorelock, Mnasithea whispered. If we are seen, we will be seized for the appearance of meddling. If we are not seen, I whispered back, we will still have meddled, but we will have done it politely. We finished the decoy. Mnasithea breathed on its surface and watched the faint kiss of moisture clear. She tucked it into her belt pouch, separate from the true tablet. Two secrets do better in different rooms. We stepped away from the work table. My heel found a barley cake left from some earlier snack. It crumbled softly, sound and texture like soft rain on a terrace. I paused and lifted my foot. I left no obvious smear. The guard's eyes, turned this way a heartbeat later, read nothing into the dust but the story of a night snack. We moved back toward the heart of the academy. At the edge of the crowd, Menesichus had stepped back from his pitch. He was saving his best voice for sunrise. I will fetch Plato, Mnasithea murmured. I will place the true tablet where he will find it without anyone else seeing. He keeps a small case near the lecture stone. When he touches it, he will feel the wax. He will read before he speaks. Good, I said. Go. Return to me by the lecture stone. Timaeus will be there. She moved off, her figure dissolving into the academy's geometry as if the building had made a place for her a long time ago. I stood for a moment and let the night press against my skin. I closed my eyes and listened to the way the world sounded when a lie prepared to meet a morning that was not on its side. Then I opened my eyes and walked back to Timaeus. He stood where we had left him, staff angled against his leg, gaze on the slow arc of the stars. You have something of a plan, he said. I do, I said, and let my mouth curve into a small smile. Now we need only probability. He tapped his staff lightly. The sound was honest. Chapter 7, in which the clues speak plain and Atlantis is set back on its shelf. We took shelter in a little alcove near a pillar, the sort of place that exists for lovers of notebooks and people who prefer to think in corners. The tall guard's lamplight roamed the wider space and did not look inward at us. I set the pieces of the puzzle on the table of my mind, the way I set coins on a desk when I am in my study. Broken half-seal with its strident, the grains of Egyptian blue, the black sheen of squid ink. On a careless hand, the sliver of brass with demotic signs that came from a later age, and a goddess's emblem misdrawn. Let us say it out loud. I said to Timaeus, though the saying was for our planning as much as for his benefit. Mnesarchus of Colonus has a motive to convert Plato's allegory into a rallying song for conquest. He has means, money, hired men, a forged plate, a practiced voice. He has a method, and I'd beneraid or berisk you've begun another tanjorin, perfuir. He has a method, perform the forgery in front of an audience before the philosopher himself can speak, so that the crowd's first impression is the loudest. Timaeus nodded, eyes on my face, his attention like a harbour taking the weight of a ship. Yes, against that, I continued, we have the authentic closing lines, hidden and now retrieved. An ally who can read both Greek and Egyptian hands. A crowd that can be led toward reflection and material proof of the forgery's errors. Do not forget the ring, Timaeus said, surprising beast. He had noticed. The man who stamps his trident on wax leaves himself at every doorway he passes. A good point, I said. And the pigment, Egyptian blue embedded in the seal's impression and smeared on a scrap, tells us he dusted his seals to make them Egyptian. The forgery cares about costume. Mnesarchus returned then, moving with less fear. She held nothing visible. It is placed, she said. He will find it when his hand touches the case. She looked to the east. The black is thinning. We have time for the smallest lesson, I said, and I spoke softly, not because danger demands quiet, but because thought does. Listen. The Atlantis of Plato, as you know, lives in the dialogues Timaeus and Critias. It speaks of rings of land and water, orichalcum that gleams like fire, bulls sacrificed, and a mighty empire that loses its virtue and drowns in a day and a night. The hero is not Atlantis. The hero is the Athens that resists hubris. In my time, people made Atlantis into a place that must be found like a lost sandal. They looked to Santorini Thera with its caldera and the buried city of Akrotiri under ash and said, "See, concentric rings." But the dates do not match Plato's telling. The place does not match, and Plato's genius lay in inventing details to make a lesson feel real. Others said the rechat structure in Mauritania, a natural eroded dome, must be the rings. But there are no matching ruins, no harbours, no canals. People looked to Cyprus, to the Black Sea, to an island near Gibraltar. Sonar traced the sea floors. Science mapped and found wonders that were themselves not Atlantis. Mnesarchus' face was intent, the way scribes look at a fresh page. "And what of the Nile's mouth?" she asked softly. "On Thonis-Heracleion," I said. A real city. It sank by earthquakes and liquefaction. Its statues were raised back to air by divers with measured hands. That city tells truth about water and stone and time. It does not speak a single word in favor of turning myth to marching orders. And Helike, Timaeus put in, we all remember when the sea ate it. Not a tale, a fact. Exactly, I said. You will say that at dawn. The point is to help the crowd remember that nature gives us enough to admire without borrowing fantasies to justify power. Scholars, I went on gently, like Kenneth Fedder in my age, remind us that the myth of Atlantis survives because people like the idea of a lost golden age. It offers a feeling at a cheap price. It lets us imagine simple problems that can be solved with a single map instead of complex problems that require character. That is why Thonis-Heracleion loves it. He wants a shortcut to glory wrapped in borrowed authority. Mnestheus' jaw tightened. Plato will not lend him that authority. Not willingly, I said. But a crowd can be made to hear what a man wants them to hear if the first act is big and loud. So we take that first act away. I placed the components in a line with my hand on the stone ledge. The broken seal with the trident, half crushed, with Egyptian blue grit caught in its tine. Conclusion. Mnestheus staged his materials to look Egyptian. He leaves his mark everywhere. He cannot resist branding. The smear of squid ink on a guard's wrist. Conclusion. The Academy's tools have been manhandled by men who do not respect them. The forgery has been in our rooms. The sliver of brass. Conclusion. Not ancient. The demotic hand is wrong. The emblem of Neith is wrong, not the authority it claims. The true wax tablet hidden under the bowl. Conclusion. We control the authentic ending, which is short and undramatic. It needs the right mouth at the right moment. Because the Egyptian blue is on his seal, and because no honest Egyptian priest would dust a Greek patron's presumptuous ring with pigment to impress Athenians, the plate's supposed origin from Sais is a fable, I said. Therefore, we can puncture his show by showing the costume seams, not by arguing the scene. Mnestheus nodded slowly. We will pull at threads until the robe falls. And then we will not laugh, I said. We will not humiliate. We will simply let the crowd feel the relief that comes with the end of a performance that had held them against their better judgment. Timaeus lifted his staff. I will begin when the horizon softens, he said. I will speak of Thera's ash, of Helike, of the great rivers that flood and feed. I will say that the gods are best honored by heedfulness. Be careful with your first sentence, I said. Use a word like remember. People resist, you must know, but they welcome remember. He smiled, spoken like a man who has diverted many storms. We are almost done, I said. Only the decoy remains to be placed and the place for the sour wine to be used. Mnestheus opened a pouch in the half-dark and let me see the decoy tablet again. The letters shone faintly drier now. It will hold for a few moments, she said. Then the heat will do its work. And the plate? I asked. The copyist's bench stands near the stage, she said. I will be there. I will ask, in a scribe's voice, for a closer look to copy a line for the crowd. Men who stage a show love helpers who make them look more important. Good, I said. When you have the corner, scrape it. Then let the vinegar bite and show the color. Do it like a demonstration, not an accusation. Explain Neith's emblem gently. Let the errors be facts. Do not say forgery. Say this is not what it claims. That phrasing leaves dignity to those who wanted to believe. She took that instruction into herself like a stone into a pouch, weight adding certainty, not burden. I can do that. And when you do, I said, I will be near the lamp that Mnesicus lifts to show his victory. I will hold it like a courtesy. Let him thank ye, and let his thanks undo his plan. The night breathed. The birds began to thick about their first notes, and then did not sing yet. This is the quietest part of the world's turning, when even a lie begins to understand it cannot outrun daylight. I let my shoulders sink an inch. The ritual of that movement is an old one for me. Moment I tell my body the thinking is done and the doing begins. We move now, I said. No rush, only purpose. We stepped out of the alcove. The tall guard turned from his post and shifted his weight like a gate deciding whether to swing. He decided he was bored. Good. The best ally in a polite rescue is a bored sentry. Mnesicus stood near the lecture stone, his plate wrapped for effect. He looked pleased with himself, the way men do when a play has nearly reached the scene where they get to be heroic. Gentlemen, he called. And yes, his shape of the world forgot women until a woman forced it to remember. You will hear ye at dawn, or before, Timaeus said conversationally nearby, as if speaking about olives. We may begin. His voice was low, but he had that ability some men have, to make low words carry farther than shouts. And still, we had a few heartbeats to knot the last thread. Chapter 8, in which we sharpen the quiet plan. I took the decoy wax tablet from Mnesicus and slid it into the fold of cloth I would use as if I were a polite assistant ready to present a thing for inspection. Mnesicus kept the true tablet under her dress, above her belt, where no one's eyes would dare linger. Timaeus stood at the edge of the lecture stone and tapped his staff once, as if to test the morning's attention. Before we begin, I said to Mnesicus, what is Plato's habit at dawn? He arrives before most, she said. He sits, speaks a little with those nearest, then lets the conversation lead him. If he means to read, he reads as if by accident. He lets the passage arise from the question. Good, I said. He will not be baited into a fight. From the colonnade, a small group approached. A few older students, 2 younger ones who still contained more energy than patience. A quiet man in a dark Hamatian with silver in his hair. The eyes tell you who is the destination of a path. Plato's eyes gathered the edges of the space the way a harbor gathers a tide. He saw people as if he had always expected them and could accommodate whatever their minds brought. He looked across the grove and found me the way a man recognizes a person who is a threat because he is trying to be anything at all. A tiny nod. He moved to the stone and laid his hand on the small case beside it. His fingers met the latch. The latch yielded. His hand brushed wax. His posture did not change a fraction. But I saw the tiny stillness that comes when a mind meets a planned word at an unplanned time. He lifted the tablet just enough for the wax to shine and for his eye to receive the line. He slid it back into the case as if it had always been there. He looked up. Mnesicus lowered her gaze as if sharing a private gratitude with the ground. My heartbeat stayed a metronome. There are moments when work is done by invisible hands. Timaeus tapped his staff again. Friends, he began, using that word with more truth than a Nesarchus had. This is the hour when the mind is clean. Remember the sea, it moves with a rhythm older than we are, and we respect it because it feeds and it takes. We have seen cities, Helike, taken as lightly as a stray toy on the floor. We have seen the land break and shift, and the river lay new silt where we will grow barley. If you want to speak about the largest things, the cosmos, the city, the soul, start with the cycles that do not flatter you. Then the stories you tell will not be in the way. His voice asked nothing of the crowd except attention. People folded in on themselves as if someone had finally given them permission to lay down their sharpened thoughts. Nesarchus watched, face composed and jaw tight. His guards found new places to stand that looked strategic and achieved nothing but showing their arms. I moved closer to the lamp set on a stand near the lecture stone. The flame lifted a small column of warmth that smelled faintly of sesame and smoke. I picked it up as if to help. The gesture put me in the position I wanted when Nesarchus decided to use the flicker for effect. He decided sooner than he had intended. Timaeus had said the word Helike, and the memory tugged at the crowd like a tide at ankles. Nesarchus stepped forward, cloth-wrapped plate in hand. And yet, he said, smiling like a man presenting a dessert at a funeral, nature does not forbid the record of men. I offer no theatre. I offer testimony from Egypt. He lifted the cloth. Not yet, I thought. Not yet. Let him unfurl his rope. I stood and watched Timaeus gently recede so there would not be a collision. He looked at me. He understood. Nausithea moved to the copyist bench like a woman about to do her work. Her posture was modest. Her eyes were open and clear. She had placed her pouch so that her hand could fall into it without looking. Nesarchus raised the plate, angle carefully chosen to make the letters catch light while blurring their errors. Behold the mark of Neith, he said. Behold the script that recorded for Solon what our city has forgotten. He took a step toward the lamp I held. I raised it slightly, polite, the way a servant raises a candle for a guest who is reading. He smiled at me, all courtesy, all condescension wrapped in grace. Thank you, he said. You are welcome, I said. The old trick about to meet the older light. Shall we also show the crowd the tablet? He added, reaching for the decoy tucked in Nausithea's front pouch. That was an improvisation I had anticipated. A man who smells a trap in one place will try to cross the stream at a different stone. But he wanted so badly to show he controlled every object on the stage that he requests what we wish to place in his hand. Of course, Nausithea said, and offered the decoy with the deference professional women extend to men who think deference is their due. He took it, fingers touching letters that were oil and shape and possibility. Read, someone called. Not Nesarchus's man, but a voice from the crowd that wanted to know and had not yet decided what. We will, shortly, Nesarchus said, but first, to prove the antiquity of this plate. He gestured to the copyist bench. Scribe, show us you can copy without error. Rid a line from the plate and give it to our Greek. Nausithea stepped to the bench, hands quiet. I will need to see the corner, she said. Scribes begin at corners. Do so, he said, pleased with himself for parodying humility. She took the corner. She drew the pumice across it with the lightest of scrapes, the sound of a cricket's leg against a leaf. The crowd paid attention. Scratching is a sound that tells the brain a small, irreversible thing has just happened. She dipped a reed in the vinegar salt and dabbed the spot. The false sheen dulled. The yellow showed its eagerness. She held the corner up where the light kissed it. "Brass," she said in a tone designed to teach, not accuse. Not the older sanctified bronze. And here she traced with her reed. The emblem of Neath is missing its circle. Perhaps the scribe who made this knew only to draw crossed arrows. A ripple went through the crowd. Not yet a wave, a shift of posture. Men who had come to be impressed rebalanced themselves on their heels. Minasarchus's smile tightened, then widened. "Some devotions vary by temple," he said smoothly. "Let us not pretend Egypt is a single hand." He lifted the decoy tablet. "But you will see Greek letters here as well. Allow me." He looked at me again. The lamp higher. I raised it. The warmth brushed the surface of the decoy. The oil had dried in the hour since we prepared it, but oil remembers heat, the way bees remember flowers. Slowly, the shine returned. Slowly, the letters thought about being letters and then decided to be wax again. He frowned. Just a line between his brows. He angled the tablet closer. A hum slipped through the crowd like breath before speech. I kept my face like water, unperturbed and present. Inside, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a mechanism working as designed. The letters thinned, the strokes widened into blur. Then the blur smoothed. What had been a parade of claims became a blank field. He lifted the tablet as if his arm could make the word return by force. "A trick of the light," he said lightly, "which is what men say when the light has played a trick on them." A boy near the front laughed and turned the sound into a cough. "It happens," I said gently, "to no one and everyone when someone prepares wax quickly for display. Heat eats haste." Nausithea did not look up. She worked, quiet, methodical, teacherly. She traced the demotic with her reed and called out 3 signs, correcting them softly as she went, like a tutor adjusting a student's hand. "This is an M, this not a D. This shape belongs to a later period." Whoever wrote this had seen a chart, not a tablet. You can admire the effort and still decline to be fooled. The crowd made that larger shift, shoulders down, eyes adjusting to the tone of reality. Minasarchus stepped back half a step without meaning to. He held the plate closer to his chest, as people do with things that have failed them. "Now," I thought. "Now," but softly. I lowered the lamp just a little, enough to take the heat off the decoy. Minasarchus sold it back to his attendant with a look that demanded gratitude for the privilege of handling it and got only confusion. The man took it and held a blank tablet like a man holds a fish that has become a stick. "Perhaps we should proceed," I said, and nodded to Timaeus as if he and I had only just decided to cooperate. He inclined his head. "Perhaps we should," Timaeus said. "We can talk about sources and sanctuaries all morning. Or we can remember why we tell stories at all." He lifted his staff. The wood made that small, honest sound again. At that moment, Plato looked up from the case he had opened and closed without fanfare. His eyes met mine. Then he sent his gaze over the crowd, Nausicaa took in a breath to speak. "Wait," Plato said, his voice low, the kind that requires silence to do its work. He raised a hand not in command, but in invitation. The morning's light had reached the first leaves. I felt the air shift. The plan was not yet fully executed. The result was not yet certain. But the final moves were now in reach, and the last breath before the word is always the most delicate. We stood with our plan sharpened, our proofs at hand, and the old man ready to say a sentence that would refuse to be a trumpet. I set the lamp carefully on its stand. My fingers left it and settled at my sides, loose. Dawn took another step closer to us, and with it, the truth. Chapter 9. Dawn, Brass, and a Vanishing Text. Dawn came with the gentlest insistence, pink softening the marble, dew silvering the plane leaves. I stood in the courtyard of Plato's Academy, a hush before a gathering. Sandaled feet scuffed gravel. Low breaths steamed faintly in the cool. The air smelled of olives and damp earth and unlit oil lamps. A few students in pale chitons drew their mantles close, eyes bright though sleep still brushed their lashes. Timaeus of Locri waited near a small platform, a simple stone step-staff tucked beneath his arm, sea-green pin catching the day's first color. Plato watched from the side, hands folded into his dark himation. His gaze took in the whole, and somehow it calmed the whole. Nausicaa of Colonus arrived with the confidence of a patron showing off a new ship. Purple edging flashed at his mantle. He nodded to those he owned with favors, then to those he hoped to own. In his right hand, wrapped in linen, he cradled a bronze plate the length of a forearm. On his finger, a gold ring engraved with a trident twinkled like a threat under kind light. Nausicaa of Sais stood in the shade of a pillar, ink still smudged along one knuckle. She kept her face turned slightly away, but she saw everything. I moved to her first and spoke softly. "Steady as reeds by calm water," I told her. "You will not need to shout. Truth here will whisper for itself." She breathed out and gave me the smallest nod. I stepped to Timaeus and leaned in. "Begin with what the sky knows," I murmured. "Cycles, not slogans." He smiled that reflective half-smile. "The sky has no patronage," he replied, and turned to the people. He lifted his staff, a gentle tap on stone. "Friends," he began, voice warm and unforced, "the cosmos is a living proportion. We rise within its breath and fall within its turning. Consider winter hands the baton to spring. Consider stars return to their place with a patience we can learn from." The courtyard listened. The lamplighter came with a small brazier and low lamps, more for ritual than need, the flames barely taller than a fingernail. I had asked for one lamp to be set upon a small bronze tripod at the platform's edge. Its polished dish cast up a warmer, closer glow than dawn gave. It was a scribe's courtesy, I would say, for anyone who read. Timaeus continued, unhurried. "We hear stories of floods. The sea remembers more than we do. Thera, the island we also call Santorini, once shed a mountain into the sky and laid paintings and houses under ash at Akrotiri. Helike, knit far from here, sank under a restless sea only a few winters past. These are not omens. They are nature doing what nature does. Lessons arise with water and stone. The gods do not need our trumpets to be present." Nausicaa raised his chin. He stepped forward, and the linen slipped from the plate. It shone yellow where the light kissed it. And yet, he said, in a voice trained for courtyards, men keep records. Priests weigh them. Athens deserves to hear what Solon heard in Egypt, what our own Critias kept safe. He lifted the plate as if proof had weight. Before he could bestow it on the morning, I moved one pace and bowed slightly. A scribe's courtesy, I said, offering the low lamp with its generous reflector. So the lines are lost to the soft light. With my other hand, I held up a wax tablet. Smooth wooden frame, pale wax surface inscribed with neat Greek that I pretended to have copied for easy reading. The letters were straight. The wax held a thin sheen lamp oil rubbed lightly and delicately by a careful hand not long ago. It would honor the academy, I added, if you place the tablet by the plate, for all to see. Timaeus did not interrupt. He only took a patient step to the side to make space on the stone. Plato's eyes flicked to the lamp, then to the tablet, then back to the crowd. He made no sign beyond a quiet breath. He didn't need to. Mnesarchus accepted the stage. He set the plate upon the stone, near the lamp, and positioned the tablet upright against a small pebble. He angled them both toward his audience with practiced flair. He looked out with a smile that did not reach the eyes. "Behold," he said, "the confirmation Sais keeps." He leaned a fraction closer to the lamp to read. The lamp's heat rose as a hand's warmth would and poured softly across the wax. The letters looked steady at first. Then their edges softened like frost in a weak sun. One line ran just enough to make a short word into a waver. Another lost a serif. A letter leaned, then settled. A puzzled murmur passed among the nearest students. I folded my hands and waited. Panic is a poor tool for a detective. Patience is better. The heat did its quiet work. The sheen of oil, invisible to anyone not looking for it, loosened the wax's skin. Letters that had seemed fixed grew faint as if eroded by the sea inside the tablet. A line that promised victory simply thinned and vanished. Another, praising divine favor, became a pale impression with no ink to hold it. "Your words," said a young man near the front, voice careful. "They are—" He stopped, searching for what he was allowed to say. "Transitant," I supplied gently. "That can happen when a text is made to perform rather than to endure." I didn't look at Mnesarchus as I said it. He would feel it more if it arrived as air and not accusation. Mnesarchus's jaw tightened. He reached for the plate as if to redouble his proof. It rang faintly against stone, a thin sound. Mnesarchus stepped forward with measured calm. "Permit me, sir," she said, "as one who writes for the academy." She held up a small iron stylus. Its tip was clean and bright. A simple test we copyists use when merchants bring us strange metals. She dragged the stylus along the plate's edge, not deep, just enough to wake the metal. A bright yellow line appeared, raw against the darker oxidation. "Brass," she said softly, "not orichalcum. Orichalcum is redder, richer. It resists like a stubborn bull. Brass yields and shows its yellow heart." She turned the plate to the people. "Also these signs." With her finger, she traced the shallow pseudo-Egyptian characters hammered into the surface. They are drawn as if from demotic, a later hand used by clerks near my home. But they are wrong. The sign for N is shaped like a ripple here, and there it should be more like a zigzag waterline. The emblem of Neith, mother of gods, is misrendered as crossed arrows. Her sign is the shuttle of a loom. No priest of Sais would carve these errors. The words were gentle, and they landed. Those who did not understand the details understood the steadiness. Truth held its posture. Such theatre, Mnesarchus retorted, to protect your master from being Medici. He broke off as a small ripple of attention turned not toward me or Mnasithea, but to his right hand. The gold trident ring caught the lamp, and a student with quick eyes drew a cracked wax bulla from his pouch, half disc only. I had returned the other half to my sleeve earlier. I crossed the stone and knelt, setting the bulla half upon the step. I did not look at Mnesarchus. Instead, I lifted the ring from his finger with only a glance to seek permission. He hesitated a second, then his own display demanded compliance. I pressed the trident into the soft wax of the broken half. The inner tine held a speck of bright blue grit. Egyptian blue pigment, rare in seals, theatrical in intent. The impression matched its missing partner perfectly, down to a tiny chip in the trident's right prong. "Your seal," I said, my voice low but carrying with the ease of a well-timed lullaby, "was used to close a packet that carried a theft. Perhaps you lent it. Perhaps someone loyal misused it. Either way, it joins your name to your proofs." I lifted the bulla to show the crowd only the fit, not the face of a man being unmasked. No need to humiliate, only to disarm. A scribe I had spoken to in the night stepped forward with a shallow bowl of sour wine, kind used to clean brushes. "Another simple test," he offered. He dabbed a cloth and touched the inscription lightly. A thin fume rose. The darkened, hammered marks bled a little color, green sneaking through like leaves in spring. "Copper content in the brass meets wine and blushes," the scribe explained apologetically to no one in particular. Mnesarchus's courteous smile had nothing to hold on to now. He looked toward Plato, and then toward the crowd, as if seeking a strand to grip in a current. The crowd offered none. Their expressions were angry. They were not whipped into anything at all. They were attentive, quiet. Nothing in the air would carry a trumpet blast. Timaeus filled the silence not with triumph, but with the sky again. "We owe it to ourselves," he said, "to know the difference between a model and a map. Mythos, story told for virtue, shows the lay of the land in the soul. Logos, argument about the world, shows the edges of rock and sea. Confuse them, can wreck either a ship or a city." Plato raised his hand just enough. His voice, when it came, was soft and even, the weight of a teacher's reassurance. "Let Critias remain, for now, a fragment," he said. "Its meaning is whole enough. The tale of Atlantis is told as mythos, so that we may examine hubris safely, not as history to justify conquest. We will not put a spear into a mirror and call it victory." He looked at Mnasithea. His eyes warmed. He didn't ask her to produce the authentic lines she had hidden. He didn't need to. The Academy takes care with what it doesn't say. The people breathed. The murmur turned from curiosity to reflection. Someone mentioned Helike in a practical voice. Another wondered at the ash at Akrotiri and whether the fish taste different there now. Quiet, grounded talk. The edge of danger slid back into its sheath without a scrape. Nesicos gathered his cloth around the plate and held it as one might hold a tool that had broken in the hand. Another time, he said, but even he did not give the words an edge. He offered Plato a small bow and withdrew through the plane trees, his guards falling in behind him with more attention to the gravel than to glory. Timaeus' staff met the stone one final time. So we let the day begin as it meant to, he said, and the day, relieved, agreed. Chapter 10. The quiet after and the way home. The courtyard softened by steps. Students drifted to shade, 2 by 2, in little islands of low conversation. A circle formed around a drawing scratched with a stick in damp earth-concentric rings, someone's quick sketch of Plato's island. The stick drew a fur X across the rings, and then a line of tiny curls showed waves flowing past them, not over them. No one needed to explain it out loud. The picture winked into a smooth patch as a sandal scuffed it away. I stood at the edge of the colonnade where swallows had begun to sketch arcs under the roof tile. Mnasithea joined me, fingertips finally still. I feared, she said, that even the true lines, if freed at the wrong moment, would become a sail for the wrong ship. You placed them where they could become ballast instead, I answered. A quiet weight, enough to keep the vessel upright. She smiled, a small thing she let herself have. When the heat took the letters from the decoy, I thought my heart would do the same. Heat is honest, I said. It reveals what holds and what doesn't. My gaze slipped to Plato. He had stepped aside, the way a host steps aside to make room for the guest's talk. He held a wax tablet in one hand, not the decoy, but another. One I suspected carried Mnasithea's careful admonition for his eyes alone. He didn't look at it now. He didn't need to. The choice had already been made. Timaeus approached, his staff tapping out a polite presence, not a command. He inclined his head to Mnasithea. Words can harm and heal, he said. Thank you for persuading them to do the latter. She bowed slightly. It was only my craft. That is what craft is for, he replied. Plato came to us then, not as a philosopher enthroned, but as a man among his companions. His gaze rested on Mnasithea first. The academy is a house, he said. It stands because hands you do not see shape the mortar. He turned to me with a glimmer that could be humor in another man and was contentment in him. You carried the lamp carefully. I worry more about lamps than about plates, I said. Plates try to dazzle. Lamps only help us see. He nodded, eyes drifting toward the rows of plane trees where dew still clung to the lower leaves. We will leave those words in Critias unwritten, and by that leave a stronger sentence in our students. He placed a palm over the tablet as one might steady a small boat in a kind surf. Mythos for virtue, he murmured. It was good counsel. We did not speak of Ensarchus again. He had taken himself out of the story, thereby ending the story the right way. The air filled instead with small domestic sounds that signal a city's safe waking. The creak of a gate hinge, a donkey's hooves on stone, a broom whispering over a threshold. Mnasithea looked back once to the platform where the lamp still burned. The flame bent a moment to a breeze and then stood up straight. I will return to my desk, she said. The day has its own needs. Slowly, I advised, Let the adrenaline leave like a tide." She laughed softly at the unfamiliar word and understood the tide. I sought a bench in the shade of a tall plane tree. The stone was cool through my tunic. I could have closed my eyes there and then, under Athens, 360 BCE, with birds trading calls and the smell of oil and wood in the air. But another bench waited somewhere else, shaped like a chair and smelling faintly of smoke and leather and old pages. The world made the exchange easier than I deserved. Cicadas sang with more insistence, then paused. In the pause, I heard the whisper of a fire in a grate, a lick of flame settling around a log. The silk of leaves became the heavier hush of curtains. The sandal grit underfoot remembered itself as the wool nap of a rug. I let the academy's colonnade recede the way a shoreline recedes when a boat gently pushes backward from the pier. An inhalation filled my chest with air that knew home. I opened my eyes to the low amber of my own lamps. The tweed of my jacket pressed a familiar pattern on my forearms. Penelope, my old beagle, shifted once, where she had found the warmest square of carpet and exhaled a small, satisfied sound. On the desk, the cracked clay buller sat open like a shell. In one half, the trident impression had softened into concentric ripples where a drop of lamp oil had fallen, memory of the morning's gentle trick. Beside it, the brass scrap I had examined earlier showed a faint bright line where my stylus had tested. It line I recognized without question. I turned the scrap in my fingers. It flashed briefly and then settled. The case had left behind no wounds, and that is the best a case can do. I leaned back and let my chair hold me. The room balanced itself around me. The minor crackle of fire, the soft demure tick of a clock, the barely there scent of cooled tobacco in the bowl of a pipe that would not be needed now. Outside, a light rain had begun to patter on stone, a good and ordinary kind. The city took it easily, absorbing it into gutters and gardens and the quiet gathering of clean air. I let my eyes close again, not to work, but to rest, and the last image behind them was not a plate or a forge, but a lamp. The wind down. The work is done. All that remains is the room, and you and the simple fact of breath. Listen to the soft patter on the window. Each drop lands and spreads, and then joins the next, and nothing hurries. Water understands being present. It falls, it rests, and it moves on at the speed of gravity and no faster. The fire in the grate speaks in a small language of ash and wood. It shifts very slightly and then is still. It does not ask anything of you. You gave enough to the day. The evening gives back by being quiet. The chair under you is a harbour. The wood knows how to hold a shape, and the cushion knows how to give. Your shoulders lower by a fraction, and that fraction is important because it is the difference between standing watch and being at anchor. Breathe in through your nose. The air is cooler than your skin and kind to your chest. Breathe out and imagine that the breath goes farther than the room, crosses to a courtyard where plain leaves stir, goes beyond that to a field, beyond that to a shoreline where small waves lean in and pull back. They keep the same measure. You do not need to count. They are counting for you, and you can borrow their numberless rhythm. If you listen, there is a boat somewhere. Is it near? Is it far? Wooden timbers creak softly as they settle against each other. A rope hums faintly where it meets a ring. The hull rocks, but we do not. The boat is tied well and is content to move in small, certain arcs. Somewhere reeds brush each other with the slow, deliberate touch of plants that have done this for longer than any story. They make a sound like the whisper of pages turned with care. It is not wind so much as the idea of wind, the gentlest moving of air that lifts and sets and lifts again. The rain goes on. It falls on stone, on leaves, on roofs, on a path that remembers many feet and asks for none now. It threads itself into the ground. The ground accepts it. The earth is generous in that way, and tonight you are allowed to be as generous with yourself. Let what comes in come in. Let what goes, go. You may remember the softness of wax turning under warmth, letters giving way to blankness, not because of loss, but because of honesty. Things that are meant to be permanent do not have to be. The day does not have to be. It can soften, it can blur, it can release its grip on your mind and become only the pale impression that proves it existed and no more. A log settles, a breath deepens. A stretch of quiet opens up like a shoreline at low tide. There is room for rest to spread out and make itself at home. Let your jaw unclench if it is holding anything. Let your tongue sit heavy and easy. Let your eyes rest behind their lids. The muscles in your hands have earned their stillness. If a thought arrives, acknowledge it the way you would acknowledge someone passing you in a corridor, with a small nod, and keep walking at the same slow pace towards sleep. Outside, the rain lightens to a fine mist, then pauses, then begins again, like a lullaby that repeats the verse you like best. The fire dims at the edges and keeps one bright ember to see you through. The room breathes with you, walls expanding and contracting in a way that is literal but is true. If you listen, you can hear Penelope's small sleep sounds, a dog's soft sigh, the tiny thrum of a dream that is just the review of a day's simple joys. You can let your own mind copy that soft, circular path through ordinary things, teacups, doorways, green leaves, the sound of your own footsteps on a good floor. We did what we came to do. We kept a story safe from being used as a weapon. Now the only story left is the one your body tells when it sleeps, the breath that goes in and the breath that goes out, over and over. The oldest narrative, the one that never needs an audience. Let the lamp lower, let the shore grow quiet, let the water hold its shape and not ask you to sail it. You are already home. Good night, my friend. Rest well.